Glory to Jesus Christ, now and forever. Somebody can fill up back here to talk about tones in our liturgical tradition. The word tone, I hear a lot of questions about this. People say, I don't know the tones, I don't have them memorized, I don't know which tones to use, etc. The word tone in our tradition really has two meanings that you need to keep straight. The first is a set of texts. I talked about the book, the Octoikos, the book of the 8 tones, which has texts for the cycle of 8 weeks, and it gives texts for every service of the day all week. So tone 1 has a full set of texts for the entire week. Tone 2 has the same ones, but they're sung to the musical tone of the same name. The reason for this is that in the Greek system, all these texts are written to be sung in what you could think of as a musical key or a mode. They're sung in that sort of musical key, and it's audibly obvious that they belong to that tone. The melodies themselves are different, and they vary from composition to composition, depending on what you're singing, from text to text, depending on what you're singing. But they obviously belong to the same group, the same family, the same musical tone. Now, in the Slavic tradition, they don't sound so similar to each other, and it is really confusing that we call them the same tone. Regardless, that's where that comes from. So, when we say tone 1, for example, there are a bunch of melodies that belong to tone 1. And the melody that you sing at any given point depends on the text, the type of text that you're singing. So tone 1 Troparion sounds different than tone 2, than tone 1 Stechera from tone 1 Liturgical verse, from the canon, from special melodies. And those all belong to tone 1. So I want to give an explanation to help you know what melody to pick of any given tone when you're singing at home. When you're singing Vespers, you want to know, what the heck am I supposed to be singing? What melody is that? So we have 8 tones, but we have, in my estimation, 68 melodies. I made this little chart here to help make things clear. So this list here is the different types of text that each has its own melody. And all of these melodies are melodies that they're basic melodies that are applied to any text you might find in a book. So for example, if you take the Menaion, it will provide that the Menaion contains the texts, all the changeable parts for any given feast day on the month and day cycle. So for January 6th, the text for Theophany, it will have the Stechera verses for the Lord I Call at Vespers, and for the Apostoca, the Prokimenon, and then the canon at Matins, and all these other things. And all it will say is tone 4, tone 2, tone 1, tone 6 special melody, blah blah blah, the name of it. But it's just text. And you have to know these melodies and know what type of text they get sung to, so that when you look at this book, you can just go, oh, I know that melody, and then you sing it, this text according to that melody. So all 68 of these melodies are that type of melody that gets sung to basically, they can be applied to any text. In fact, in seminary, there was one priest who was telling us what you should be able to do is pick up any book or anything and sing it to any one of the melodies from this chart. He says he handed me a wine bottle and says, all right, sing the label in tone 3 Stahera melody. And then you sing it. So okay, now do tone 4 Troparian. And then anyway, that's what you have to be able to do. So I'm going to go through these melodies and explain them a little bit. The first, Troparia. A Troparian is a text that is sung for a specific feast or saint or day. It's sort of like a theme song. The Troparian for Pascha is Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon this in the tombs bestowing life. That's Troparian for Pascha, and we sing it all the time. The Troparian there are 8 resurrectional Troparia that get rotated throughout the weeks. Often, on that note, people incorrectly call the Troparia melodies resurrectional. There's nothing resurrectional about those melodies. The only reason, as far as I can tell, the only reason they call those melodies not Troparia melodies but resurrectional melodies, or resurrectional tones, is because they maybe they only come to church on Sundays and they only hear those melodies sung with the resurrectional Troparian, the text of the resurrectional Troparian. Anyway, if you hear someone say resurrectional tone, that's what they mean. They mean either the Troparian or the Kondakion of that tone. So, Troparia, there are 8. By the way, this chart is according to the Galician system. In my parish growing up, we used mostly the Kievan system, as in the Kievan melodies. But this system should more or less be the same for everyone. I don't know about the Greeks. I don't know anything about Greek chant. But there might be, where there are holes in this one, there might be special melodies for them. I don't know. But this is the Galician system here. So there are 8 unique melodies by which Troparia are sung, for one of each of the 8 tones. Then you have Kontakia. Kontakia are similar to Troparia. They're not sung in all the same places. They're not sung at Vespers, for example, whereas Troparia are sung right before the dismissal. They usually have a more historical perspective, but not always. In the Galician system, you'll notice here that tones 1, 2, 5, and 7 do not have melodies for the Kontakia. That is, they don't have melodies that differ from the Troparian. So in the Galician system, Kontakian tone 1, 2, 5, and 7 are sung to the Troparian of the same tone. Then you have Prokimena. I have listed here 8 Prokimena. Every tone has its own Prokimena melody, but I'm told, I'm not 100% sure which exactly, but there are different Prokimena even of the same tone. So at Vespers and at Matins and at Liturgy, the Prokimenon of tone 1 might be different. Also, there are great Prokimena for Vespers. There are great Prokimena that, for example, on Saturday evening we sing "The Lord is King, He is robed in majesty." That is a great Prokimenon in tone, I believe in tone 6, but it's sung differently than the other tone 6. So, Prokimena melodies. These are short verses. We know what Prokimena are. They're short verses, usually from a psalm. The reader chants it, the people respond, they sing it. He chants the verse, they sing the Prokimenon. He does all the verses till the end, and then eventually each time the people respond, and at the end the reader chants the first half of the Prokimenon, and the people respond with the second half, and that's everything. Prokimena are usually sung before readings, as in the places in the liturgy where readings are read, Prokimena are sung. So at Vespers, after the entrance, there's a Prokimenon, and if there are readings, that's when the readings are read. Also at Matins, there's Prokimena before the Gospel reading, and at the Divine Liturgy, there's Prokimena before the reading, and then an Alleluia, which is sung to the same melody. Alleluia sung before the Gospel reading. The next category on here is stechera. The stechera are verses, poetic verses, usually sung. There's a bunch of them sung one after the other, and there are little verses in between them. So, for example, at Vespers, at Lord I Call, Psalm 140 is sung. Lord, I call upon you, hear me, O Lord. Lord, I call upon you, hear me, etc., etc. The verses of the psalm are chanted, and then at some point, depending on how many stechera there are, which depends on the grade of the feast day, inserted into those is a stecheron. And then the psalm verses, so that's chanted according to the stecheron melody of whatever given tone, and then the next psalm verse is sung to a special introductory melody to clue you in on what melody is sung. So I've listed just 8 of those stechera melodies. If you want to count the stich melody, the introductory verse melody is separate, then that's 16, not 8. The next category of text is the litia. At litia, at Vespers or at Great Compline or whenever you have it, there are special texts, festal texts to be sung. Litia comes from the word for processing. So at Vespers, when we have litia, there's a procession, and the way this should work is you go outside the church, and while you're processing outside the church, these verses are sung. And then there's the special prayers, and you go back in the church and you bless the loaves and the bread and the wine and wheat wine and oil. And that's artoklesia, the breaking of the bread, which is distinct from litia, which is the procession. So for the litia, there are special verses. In the Slavic tradition, I think in all Slavic tradition, but certainly in the Galician tradition, the litia verses are sung to what are called the Bulgarian tones, or Bulharsky. They don't sound like what they sing in Bulgaria, so I don't know why they're called that, but that's what they're called. The Bulharsky melodies. There are 7. You'll notice that tone 7 here does not have one. I've heard actually that there is a melody for tone 7 Bulharsky. It's just that it's never called for. There's not a single text that calls for tone 7 Bulharsky. So that's 7 more melodies. Next, we have the canon. Canons are sung at matins, but also at Compline and at Compline. Canons are not always sung to a melody. Sometimes they're just sort of straight chanted. But there are melodies for canons. At matins, so a canon consists of an irmos, which is almost always sung, and then little troparia, or tropartsi, that are little troparia, and in between them is sung usually Most Holy Theotokos, save us, or Glory to you, or God, glory to you, glory to your holy resurrection, O Christ, or something like that is sung between them. And then there's a katavasia, which is usually the irmos a second time. So those are sung. The canon can be sung to special melodies, as in canon melodies. Galician, I'm not sure if Galician tradition has melodies for the canon. Certainly Kievan chant does. But because I'm not sure of that, because no one sings canons to special melodies in Ukraine or in the Galician system, they have one melody that they'll use, but I'm not sure if they have others. They're not in this book, which is a book of church melodies according to Galician chant. So I don't know. I put 8 in parentheses. If you use Kievan chant, there's 8 beautiful melodies for the canon. Then the next class of texts is stechera, but special melody stechera. So they are sung in the same places and the same times as other stechera. It's just that instead of saying sing these stechera in tone 4, or it has the text with tone 4 in front of it, it says tone 4, and then usually in italics or red ink or something like that, it says it has a name, a phrase, the first few words of the model text, the model melody. So for example, in the Nativity Fast, we have at Vespers, there is sung the melody, O House of Ephrathah, because the first time it's sung, the first word of it is O House of Ephrathah. And so that's the model text, the model melody. And so every time that melody is called for, it just labels it, O House of Ephrathah, according to the melody, O House of Ephrathah. And so you can sort of call it back and sing it that way. Next, so you'll notice that these are not evenly spread out. There's 3 for tone 1, 3 for tone 2, none for tone 3, 3 for tone 4, 1 for tone 5, 3 for tone 6, none for tone 7, and 2 for tone 8 in the Galician system. I'm not promising this is the same in other systems. And then there's a similar deal for Troparia. It's model melodies based on some text. So again, all of these melodies are melodies that are used repeatedly and applied to generic texts. And to know which particular melody to pick, you have to know what sort of text you're singing. If it's Troparian, you choose this melody. If it's a Troparian of tone 1, you choose this melody. If it's a Troparian of tone 6, you choose this melody. If it's a canon Irmos of tone 1, you choose this melody. Right, so anyway, according to this chart, I have 68 melodies that are hard to memorize. I'll just say that. That you have to know if you want to sing everything properly. If you don't know a melody, it calls for a special melody or some other thing that you don't know. Sing what you do know, or have a book on hand and just look it up real quick and then sing it. Even in church at the cantor stand, you can do that. It's fine. If you're praying at home, it's even easier to just have a book and look it up. When I talk about books, there are various books from various people, resources online that have music, have the notes for everything laid out. The Archieparchy of Pittsburgh for the Ruthenian Church has the Metropolitan Cantor Institute. They have lots and lots of resources and audio recordings and things, but that's all Ruthenian chant. This book is for Ukrainian chant. Unfortunately, this book is in Ukrainian, but if you can read notes, then it might help you. You don't necessarily know what's written there, what it is that you're singing. For Kievan chant, there's lots of resources if you want Kievan chant. But anyway, if you don't know a particular melody, either sing another melody in the same tone. For example, if it calls for a special staccato melody and you don't know it, just sing it in the regular staccato melody. Or sing it in a different, if you don't know this regular staccato melody, for example, tone 4, I can never remember. So if you don't know staccato melody tone 4, sing it in tone 5 or tone 3 or tone 8 or whatever you do know. Just sing piously and God will accept that. That's ultimately what's important. So I think that's all I have to say. Good luck. It is complicated. If you have some questions, let me know. God bless.